Hi, it's Mark here from the Super League Pod. After a positive reception to the first SLP Short with Josh McAllister from RL Latest, welcome along to the second SLP Short, where I'm joined by Nate from the Rugby League in America podcast. I asked Nate for some insight into the American Domestic League and find out who the teams and players to look out for in 2018 are as their season gets underway next weekend. We also look at the international scene and talk a bit about the possible move for a New York side in Super League. Hopefully you enjoy our chat. So it's Mark and Nate then having a good chat about Rugby League from each side of the Atlantic here. How are you doing, Nate? You well?
I'm well. I appreciate you having me join in today.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. We're going to be releasing this sort of together, so there'll be bits on both shows for us to share with our listeners, and hopefully, some people that have been listening to the Super League pod for a while will pick up on Rugby League in America and get on your show, and hopefully SLP can improve its global footprint as well off the back of this, Nate.
Building up the British Empire all over again. I love it.
Maybe with less, colonial murders and stuff this time around, and slavery. We'll let something slide into the past where they certainly belong. Okay, but what we want to talk about really actually is the future more than the past, I suppose, with all what's going on with your show and with Rugby League on your side of the Atlantic, because we've got lots of exciting things with the Toronto Wolfpack in Canada.
Oh yeah.
Over the last couple of years, and with the potential for the New York franchise to join the league system at some point at some level, and with obviously there's the whiskey, and with the and with the Denver test as well later in the year. So, I mean, is it an exciting time for you to be a Rugby League fan that you've been for so many years in America at this stage?
I think it's a freaking great time for it. I really do. I mean, it's the way I look at it is so for those who don't know, we do have Rugby League here in the States. I'm sure everybody does, but I haven't been able to be around and play since the very beginning and all that kind of stuff. You had you had the teams that were in the Philadelphia area. That's really where they got picked up or got started. And, it was great. And I was late to the game. But now that I'm here, it's super exciting. It's unbelievable just how much is going on here in the States. And it's awesome to be a part of. To me, it's a great time with the Denver test, which may or may not be sticky for some of you guys, but
I've got no issues with it. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I think it's phenomenal. And then obviously the last Rugby League World Cup, the score wasn't the way you wanted it to be, but the fact that we brought in some of our domestic players, I think that's great. That shows, just a lot of improvement as far as going forward, as far as what that'll mean. And I think it's a great time to be in Rugby League in the States.
And of course, you've got a few American players who've got genuine American heritage playing in the English leagues now. Ryan Burrows scored another try for the London Skolars. I think he's 2 in 2 games.
Yes, he did.
At the time of recording, and we just mentioned before we hit record, Junior Vaivai tore a new one into my Wigan Warriors on Friday
you
night.
said you didn't want to talk about that one. You said you didn't.
We're just that's it. We're covering it and moving on, so that I'm acknowledging what the great American players are doing in our game.
Listen, Ryan Burrows, man, he's he is one of those guys that we need to go forward and continue to do well. So I'm pumped that he's there in London. Obviously he was with Toronto. That's great, but then him being in in the London Scholars side, it gets him that awareness every week on a national, international scale. And I think that's really, really big. I mean, for us, by the way, in my mind, when I watch Ryan Burrows run, if you ever see a guy on one of those BMX bikes that goes downhill on one of those YouTube videos, and you're always thinking they're about to break something. That's how Ryan Burrows runs. To me, he's always running. It's passion. That's what it is when he runs. He's a great guy to watch, but when
he's got
he runs,
no concern for his own physical well-being
whatsoever, which is wonderful. And then the fact that, and I say this in a way that it's important for him to understand if he ever hears this. I don't think he will, but if he ever hears this, to not ever see my wife, because I'm pretty sure she thinks he's Jax from that show Sons of Anarchy. So that's who he looks like. It's ridiculous. Brings
so
that up.
She's a big fan.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. But we won't talk about that, and we won't talk about Wigan, and we'll leave it. We'll leave those on the side.
Well, what I do want to talk about then, what you just touched on, is you mentioned where the domestic game kind of sprang from. We're familiar with a few club names, the Jacksonville Axemen, because they've got such a quality name. It's one that we're aware of. There's the Atlanta Rhinos, who have a link up sort of with the Leeds Rhinos informally there, and we know about the teams up in Brooklyn, because if I'm right, there was a link to a former Castleford player who's now a model whose name has just escaped my memory, and there's also the Boston 13s and Philadelphia as well, like you mentioned. So the domestic season's just about kicking off, isn't it, in your neck of the woods?
Oh yeah. So we've got the this coming weekend, June 2nd is when the games kick off, and it's going to be great, man. It really is. Like we've got the excuse me. I guess I should run through the teams real quick so everybody has an idea. So if you start in Boston, obviously up there we have the 13s, and then you come down in the New York area and the Big Apple. We have 2 teams in the city and 1 just on the outskirts. And so we have Brooklyn right there in the Brooklyn Kings, like you just mentioned, and then after that we have the New York Knights. They've been around for quite a while, and then we have the White Plains Wombats. It's my favorite name in the league is the Wombats, and I love that. And it's kind of a funny story. I'll tell you that funny story. Let me give you the rest of the teams, and I'll tell you where that comes from, why I think it's so funny. But anyway, so you've got them, and then as you come down a little ways, you'll get into Philadelphia. So we have the Philadelphia Fight, great name for the city of brotherly love. And then you have the Delaware Black Foxes. We have the Nova, which is Northern Virginia, so it's just south of D.C. is where they're located, the Nova Eagles. And then when you go down into that Southern Conference, you have the Jacksonville Axemen, like we already mentioned. We have the Tampa Mayhem. We have the Atlanta Rhinos, which is our defending national champions. And then we have a new team this year, the Southwest Florida Copperheads. We have them. We have the Central Florida Warriors, and I don't think they're gone at all. Actually, I think they're taking the year off for reasons just to reset and kind of recalibrate their organization. But I think they'll be back in the league. In my personal opinion, I'm not somebody on the staff of the league, but that's my personal opinion on it. So,
sure.
But those are the teams. Kind of the funny on the Wombat. This will make sense for your show, I'm sure. Where that comes from is actually, it's kind of hilarious. So I spent some time serving on active duty in the Air Force, and it's been a big part of my life. But anyways, though, having said that, though, we always travel over. You go through Canada on your way over, usually from the States, stay the night, and then you end up, over in Germany or something like that, or England, or wherever you end up going, depending on what you're doing. But we stopped in England as well. But we were stopping in Canada one night. We're out. We're having a couple drinks, enjoying some of the refreshments that they may or may not have had in the Canadian region. Great people up there. I always have a blast when I'm up there. I try to go to some of the hockey games, obviously, but I'm not trying to pinpoint all Canadians as hockey people, but let's be real, that's what they are. But anyways, though, so we're up there.
Some of the Wolfpack people, too.
Yes, some of the Wolfpack people. I mean, I love the Wolfpack. I love all the guys I hear talking about it. It's awesome. I know that they can't help it. They have to, scratch their arm. It's their itch whenever they see hockey on TV, though. I know they do. But so we're out hanging out. It's Canada. It's not even England. And, one of the cops, we had one of the guys with us. We're taking him back to the hotel, and one of the cops says, is he okay, kind of thing, just really nice, is he okay, is he gonna be all right? And I said, yeah, we got him, we'll take him right back to his room, he'll be fine. And he said, okay, that's good. And right as we were walking off, he just turned to him and he just, hello, governor, just changed to what he thought was a British accent. And then, of course, the guy was not enthused by that at all. He was not excited, and he said a couple other things, asked him a couple ridiculous things, tried to do it in a British accent. Guy was looking at him like he was crazy. We finally got him to calm down. I was like, all right, please, let's go. And then for whatever reason, he changed to an Australian accent, his version of one, and just started repeating the word wombat over and over and over again. Funniest thing ever. The cop was a good sport about it. Let him go. We got him back to his hotel, and he realized he was an idiot in the morning. But since then, that word has just cracked me up. So whenever they came into existence, I thought that was one of the best things ever.
So that wasn't, that was just two separate stories, or were you responsible for the White Plains Wombats having the name?
I was not responsible for them in that name at all, not at all. But that's why that name cracks me up every time I hear it. It's a good memory, and it always makes me laugh.
You mentioned then that the Rhinos are the reigning champions. If I'm right in thinking before that it was the Boston 13s had won it a couple of times in recent years. I might be wrong, but who do you think are the favourites this year around then?
Well, so you're right. The 13s did win it. They won it a couple of years ago. You've got the Philadelphia Fight. They've won 4 of those national championships in the USARL. Then the Boston 13s have won 1, and the excuse me, sorry. The Atlanta Rhinos obviously won last year. The Jacksonville Axemen, they've won as well. So we've had the different teams pull off the victories, and it's obviously it's been a pretty good thing. So there's been 4 teams that have won it. 4 of them going to Philadelphia, so they kind of have the rights to brag a little bit more than the others. But Atlanta has it right now. From a standpoint of who's the favorite, I mean, it's one of those things where you never know, because a lot of it depends on imports. We're allowed,
Sure.
we put 3 imports on the field, so you can have guys from all over the place. But as far as imports that come in for the season, which for anybody that hears this and they're thinking that they'd like to come play in America, come spend a gorgeous summer here in the States and try to play with one of these teams. They welcome them in, and they do a pretty good job of taking care of the guys. Obviously, it's not a paid league, so you're not going to get $1 million to play here, but you'll have some fun. You'll have some great stories. But honestly, it's tough to say which team's going to be the best one coming out of the chute, but I tend to think that it's going to be one of the teams in the South that's going to end up being the better one. It's hard to say that Atlanta won't, because Atlanta is, for those who don't know, Atlanta is one of the richest talent pools for athletes in America. Yeah. I mean, it is truly, and it's football mad. Like the
athletes
whole Southern
and rappers, it seems to be.
Oh God, yeah. Athletes, rappers, strip clubs that get professional athletes in trouble, those type of things. Those are the things that they have in Atlanta. But since none of those guys are the professional athletes, I'd actually tend to say that they'll be really hard to beat. Jacksonville looked really good in its preseason game against the Wombats last weekend. They're going to be tough. I think the South is going to be dangerous. Yeah, I think Atlanta is going to be the team to beat again, just because nobody was able to solve that problem last year, and they did lose a couple guys to retirement and moved on to go play overseas and have fun, but man, they're sitting in a talent rich area. So once I think about halfway through the season, you'd be able to see if they recovered, but by losing those guys.
Is there any players that we should be looking out for making the headlines? Obviously, we've seen a few people who have maybe flicked between playing a few games, like you've said, about coming over and playing in America and then going back and playing in the lower leagues in Australia and things like that, and some of those guys then have made their names in the World Cups recently. Is there any players we should be looking out for that maybe aren't quite on our radar yet over here in England?
As far as that one probably is on your radar that some of you are familiar with is Peter Lupton, who plays for Boston, who was a Welsh international. But as far as the ones who aren't, there's a good thing about this from a standpoint of the Americans that are here that are playing. You're looking at like Josh Rice, who plays in New York. He's going to be one of those guys that played in the World Cup. CJ Cortellano, he played in the World Cup. He's probably a little bit more familiar. You're going to have a lot. I am interested to see who Atlanta produces this year, because they did lose some of their guys. But you're going to have a lot of. Here's the best thing about this league, and especially again the South. Jacksonville, I think, will produce some as well. But you're going to have a lot of guys that nobody knows who they are right now. And about 2 weeks into the season, everybody's going to be like, holy shit, who is that kid? Because they're going to bring somebody in who's like super fast.
Yeah, some sort of college football reject kind of guy who's.
Exactly. You get a lot of that. We have one of the guys that's back from playing overseas now, and he's actually going to be with that new Copperheads team. We've got the 2 guys that you guys will be familiar with, or I think you would be, but Rodriguez Caesar, who I actually had the chance to play alongside of whenever I was living in Atlanta on the Union side. And once league kicked off, he immediately jumped into that. He's been playing down under for a little bit. And then Sterling Wynn, he's another one that you guys may be a little bit familiar with. They're down there with that new team, and that's going to be dangerous.
That's exciting to see. So do you think, obviously we're used to seeing the USA national side in the World Cups kind of with a lot of heritage players, but it tends to be the homegrown players that get you guys qualified for the World Cups each time around. So who is what do you see of that makeup? Do you like the way that works, or would you rather more of the homegrown guys will getting game time in World Cups and things like that now?
I mean, everybody wants their hometown guys to get it, but having said that, I think the way that we've managed to do it, I wasn't on the team that selected, obviously, or I haven't been on the inside of any of this, but I think the way that we did it was good for our development. So I think the 2013 one, I've heard some people say, oh, well, it was a team full of heritage players. Well, it was, but we also didn't have a team that we could field, necessarily full of all homegrown talent at that time that would have made sense